Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be another deep dive book review. So I will be talking about The Last Unicorn by Peter Beagle or Bagel. And this was a childhood movie favorite of mine that I only just recently discovered that it was a book. Why I should be surprised anymore. Every time I find out that one of my favorite movies as a kid or one of my favorite movies in general, I end up finding out that it was a book to start off with, right? So I thought I would give that a go. And this is going to be another situation where I would definitely prefer the movie to the book. So they're pretty similar. There isn't a whole lot of difference really between the two. It's just that the book drew things out a lot. A lot. So The Last Unicorn follows the story of, literally as it sounds, the story of unicorns. So there is a young unicorn who, or not so young unicorn, who lives in a forest, and she goes about her daily life, and there's a couple of hunters that come through the forest, and she ends up overhearing them and discovering that she might have been the last unicorn. And it left her puzzling and confused and unsettled and unsure, because she suddenly realized it had been a very long time since she had seen another one. And while it can go for very long periods of time in between seeing one another, she couldn't remember the last time she had seen one. So she decides to leave her protective haven of the forest and to go in search of them. And going along her journey, she ends up coming across a magician who is traveling around with a fair or a carnival of sorts. And this woman is a witch, and her goal is to her carnival is of mythical creatures, or to make people see mythical creatures. So because catching them is very hard to do and rare and hard to find in the first place, she ends up using magic to accomplish her goals, or illusions really. And she ends up turning a old lion into something else, an old serpent into an almost dragon type thing. Like, she takes a basic animal and she creates an illusion to show you what you might see. And she uses this to entertain people as she goes out from town to town. And the unicorn had decided to take a rest and sleep on the side of the road. And unfortunate events, the woman comes across her. And she recognizes her instantly. The unicorn doesn't realize that so many years have passed that men don't recognize a unicorn when they see one. They see a horse, and not a horse with a horn. But she knew what she was looking at, and so she had the magician, between the magician and her other handler, trap the animal while it was asleep. And so between the unicorn, she managed to capture one other creature, and she ends up catching a real life harpy. So that's sort of the next step of the unicorn's journey. She ends up encountering this woman and the carnival, and then the magician, who doesn't think it's right anymore, ends up setting her free or helping her escape, and then moving on from there. So they go from there, and they end up coming across a group of people who are, for lack of a better way to put it, they're like a modern day Robin Hood group, where they steal from the riches and give to the poor, when really the truth is they steal from everybody and just pay the richest person in the land to leave them alone, basically. And so she comes across those people, and then they end up moving on along, and it's across this journey that they end up learning that something about King Haggard and the Red Bull, which is what the big mystery is. And they end up discovering that King Haggard is a king in basically a cursed kingdom, the story with that is he had a witch build him a castle, a grand castle, and rather than keep up his end of the bargain and pay her like he had promised, he had not done that, and so she cursed the land of it. And so very little thrived in the kingdom and everything else, and so she ends up learning that King Haggard had one true passion or one true interest, and that was unicorns and the sea. So he ends up enslaving, so to speak, a red bull that went around the entire globe, and it had captured and lured every single unicorn to him, and captured trapped them in the swell of the sea, so that whenever the waves come up, you could see them, but they don't come out of the water because they're too afraid of the red bull. So she ends up learning all this over time, and before she can do anything about it, she ends up finding herself at King Haggard's castle, and the red bull had discovered her and was almost ended up in the same fate as the other ones. When the magician decided, just for a little bit of luck, he ends up trying to change her into something else to protect her temporarily until they could confirm their suspicions as to where the other unicorns are. And he ends up inadvertently turning her into a human girl. And so now this once unicorn, a mythical creature, immortal creature, ends up being trapped in a human shell that is forever dying and changing and aging. And she ends up going through the emotions and feelings of regret and everything else that a regular person would go through, which would be completely new for a creature like her. So, she ends up experiencing emotions of love and meeting a prince and going through all these different things, and they end up getting themselves jobs, so to speak, at not her, but the magician and other people they meet along the way end up taking refuge at the castle so they can figure out what became of the other unicorns. And it's while staying there that they discover that they're trapped in the ocean. And at the end of the story, it's it's a very simple story. At the end of the story, she gets turned back, although it's a little reluctant and she doesn't want to because she's fallen in love with the prince there. And then she gets turned back anyway. So it goes on from there. So, they end up saving all the unicorns and, happily ever after. So it's a very simple story, very cut and dry. But what I enjoyed the most, it's not so much the events themselves as it is the emotion that is driven behind the story. It is a story that I really can connect with, and it doesn't matter whether you you can kind of connect with every single character. It doesn't matter if it's King Haggard and why he did what he did, or the magician and the story revolving around him, or all the other characters that join in as time goes on. There's only really so many characters. Connecting with the unicorn as she goes from animal to human to animal again, and everything that entails. And there's just so much emotion in the story that, it can really suck you in. If you get really into it, you can cry when they cry and you feel what they feel. And that is something that I enjoyed the most out of this. It's a very heartfelt, emotional story. And I'm probably not doing it justice. So for those of you who have never seen it or read it, I'd highly recommend giving it a try. And I would definitely suggest the movie versus the book. And the only reason why I suggest that is because the movie is very to the point. It's A to Z, this is what happened. And all the emotions are still there. In fact, I find it way more emotional watching it than reading it in this case. Because in the book, everything is really, really drawn out. So, a story that it was just extended too far out. I think it was overly done, and it was unnecessary. So, although I enjoyed them both, and I did enjoy some of the additional descriptions in some cases, I definitely still prefer the movie. And it really, the extra bits that were in the book, it honestly you could do without. You can watch the movie and fall in love with the movie and get emotionally invested in the story without ever having picked up the book. So, but yeah, that is kind of my thoughts and feelings and rundown of that. So, I'd highly recommend it to anybody. Um, it can be a little scary though, so I wouldn't necessarily let any young children watch it just because the atmosphere of the king and the prince and the Red Bull and all that toward the end can be a little scary, along with some of the different creatures out of the carnival. So, um, yeah, but that was kind of my rundown on that. So, yeah. So, for those of you who have never read it or watched it, I'd highly recommend it. But yeah, that was kind of my rundown on the last unicorn by Peter Bagel or Beagle. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's how I'm saying it. So yeah, thank you again so much for watching my channel. If you are new to my channel, I greatly appreciate you checking me out. And if you like this, I would highly recommend or suggest that you like, share, and subscribe. And then if you are a repeat follower, I greatly appreciate your support. And I will see you in the next video.